So today we're talking about the relapse process, okay, and about you know they have a definition here of what relapse is. It says the process of becoming dysfunctional in your sobriety. I really hate that word dysfunctional, right? This is from a lecture that this one person did one time. I prefer the term overwhelmed because I think it's much more accurate. Okay, and everybody gets overwhelmed, and it triggers, when we get overwhelmed, a thought about drinking or using again. So it's going to happen one way or the other. Your addiction, if you're like me, a late-stage alcoholic and addict, my addiction talks to me, and it's going to talk to me till the day I die. It just will. It's part of my journey. Knowledge of yourself can't divorce you from yourself, right? So everybody thinks about it. It's what you do with it when it talks to you, actually. And in the old days in treatment, they used to do a lot of shame and blame whenever your addiction would talk to you. And they would actually stress you out more. Oh, your addiction's talking to you, go to more meetings. Do more journaling, do all this. I mean, they would never just say, oh, hey, you're just missing it. Right? You're actually thinking about it. Like, it's like breaking up with somebody or losing a tooth. You're more aware of the loss at the beginning, and it's going to make you think about it occasionally. But grief is a process, it's not an event. So grieving the loss of your relationship with alcohol and drugs and the positive things that it used to do for you is all part of early recovery. And everybody in the old time treatment always wanted to focus on, let's talk about all the negative stuff and try to scare you, or they would talk the other thing. They would go, oh, your life's going to be so much better up here, something that we haven't experienced yet. And look, you're going to find all these new people in recovery, but we're not connected yet. And so we're usually right here, like letting go of what's not working. They talk about all these promises up here, but we're right here in limbo land, okay? And nobody's ever acknowledging that it sucks to be right here, right? Like, talk about that PO that I had that said, hey, what's up? And I said, I always get nervous when I get off probation, because every time I do, like, I wind up back here within like a couple of weeks. Or a month, or whatever. Like, I've just been in this for 8 years.
That's around, like the purgatory of recovery.
Right, yeah, around and around. I'm like that revolving door client, right? And so next time I came in, he said, hey, I had a talk with the judge. We moved you up to a high risk because you said you were thinking about using. So you know what? We extended your probation for 6 months. So they trained me to do what? Like when I went in, people train you like you treat them. Right. So they said, next time I went in, they said, how you doing, Chris? I said, I'm fucking great.
Yeah.
Everything's great, right? And he goes, really? Because last week you were pretty shaky and whatever. And I said, no, you know what? And I said, do you know what I got to do to get out of here? And they tell me I got to get a sponsor. I got my drug dealer to call. My PO. Hey, I'm Chris's sponsor. He'd been through court order through treatment. He knew what to say, right? He said, yeah, we're working on step 1 right now, powerlessness. Right? We're working on that, manageability. Right? He's calling my PO, and my PO's going, hey, you're a sponsor. Sounds like he knows what he's talking about, Chris. I go, yeah. Everything's great. Okay? And in the meantime, I'm not getting whatever I need. Right? And nobody's validating my grief. Because, like I met with a guy today for his assessment. He looked at me and he crossed his arms. He goes, you're going to tell me I'm a drunk, right? Got to do all these things to it. I go, I don't know. I just met you. I've known you for like 5 minutes. I said, frankly, it doesn't matter what I think. Doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It matters what you think. And what the truth of your relationship with alcohol and drugs is, only you know that for sure. I just have to know me, right? Like, I have lost the ability, I never even had it, to like control drinking and using. I, from the get-go, when I was 10, like, started drinking and using, let's go. Like, I don't get people that drink 1 or 2. That's annoying. Like, what? Why bother? What the hell's that going to do for me, right? Half a roach, my brother would get happy. Oh, okay, a little buzz. I go, God, what is that going to do? Right? It's just like, he goes, I don't get that thinking, Chris. And I go, well, I just have a different reaction to it than you do. Okay? So, relapse is a process, okay? Lapsing, whether or not you use, can be a one-time thing. Okay? And my sponsor used to say, a lapse, Chris, is like, going back, like, if you ever broken up with somebody you know is not good for you, but, like, the sex is off the chain, right, with that person, but they're crazy, or it's just, like, toxic, or it's not a healthy relationship, but it's like going back for a bad hookup, or a good hookup, right? The hookup's great, but then you're driving home going, oh, man, there's some crap gonna come with this, right? There's a lot of drama. Oh, she's gonna make me call. It's gonna be this. It's gonna be whatever, you know. And I just wanted to hook up. And he said, that's the thing that nobody ever talks about is what are these positive things that it does for you, right? And so we all talked about, like, what's the number one reason people drink and use? It feels good.
Feels good.
Yeah. It changes how you feel.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you would pay the same for an ounce of weed that you would for an ounce of oregano. Right? Or a fifth of, you know, like lemonade that you would for a fifth of Jack. You wouldn't pay the same amount because it isn't going to do the same thing for you. Okay? So, you know, that's the number one reason that we all go back eventually. But, you know, how quickly you move into recovery depends on, like, how far progressed you are in your addiction. So I used to see these people that would come in and just get it right away, right? Everything's great, and this is a great program, Chris, is whatever. And they were actually sincere, and they just jump in. It's their first time through, and they're just like, oh, and they're embracing it. And I know some of them are still sober today and happy, and I used to hate those people. I used to go, God, Bill, they just come in and get it. And he goes, you know, Chris, they were not as wounded and overwhelmed and unequipped as you were when you came into recovery. You're like a person who was hit by a Mack truck and is in the ICU. You know, they cut themselves stepping on a piece of glass and got a couple stitches. They're much more able to get up and get going than you are because they were better equipped through life. People showed up for them more. They had more success. They had more whatever. You know, when they got into recovery, for whatever reason, maybe they didn't have an off switch or they worked hard at becoming addicted and they got there. But they haven't lost as much as you, and they're not as overwhelmed or unequipped. Your healing is going to take longer. But everybody has a different journey into recovery. Nobody ever comes into the same place. So there are some basic things that we all do in recovery to start getting our own healing. But it's a different pace for everybody. And the worst thing we do, like a lot of people, when they first come into recovery, will start comparing themselves out, right? They look around the room and go, well, I'm not as bad as that, or that hasn't happened to me yet. They call it the yets in 12-step programs. And so they look for ways to compare themselves out instead of what they have in common. Okay? So, you know, relapse, or, hey, so, there you go, man. That's cool. Yeah. So relapse really is just about, like, this process here about going down here. And there's a guy named Terence Gorski, and he wrote this book called Staying Sober. And he talked a lot about he's the guy that, like, in the 80s did a lot of the research on the brain, the post-acute withdrawal we've talked about before. And he has a whole, like, program on relapse prevention. That's his big thing, right? And he talked about that all relapse starts with a stuck point up here. And at some point of your recovery that you, like, have some difficulty dealing with, or it's a trigger or a stress or something going on, okay? So the earlier you are when you start drinking and using, the more stuck points you have when you get sober. Because you've used it for more reasons. There's more things that it's done for you. And so there are many more things that are going to remind you of it because you've had a longer relationship and it's meant something more to you. You've invested more in it, right? Than somebody who's just a social drinker or a user. So there's so many things that can make you think about it or trigger you. And so what happens is that, you know, a lot of times though, you know, human nature is to want to compartmentalize our stress, because if you had to really deal with all of everything that was coming at you every day, especially if you're, like, on house arrest or you're in the legal system where you got financial stuff or relationship things or you're dealing with, you know, where am I going to live, all those other kind of things, you can't walk around feeling that all the time or you wouldn't get out of bed. So your body and your soul are kind of infinitely wise. They help you compartmentalize all these parts of your life. So sometimes you're not even aware of how much stress and all the things that are actually coming at you in the moment. And so, you know, because we're compartmentalizing, we're not always aware of that. And what happens is that we talked about before, remember how stress wakes up that part, the using part of the brain? So it wakes up your pleasure center, that nucleus accumbens, and it starts humming and it says, feed me. And it shuts off the thinking part of your brain at that point. Okay? Now, like it says on here, that's where post-acute withdrawal is. So if you have a way of checking in with yourself on a regular basis, like on a daily basis, and you can say, oh, how much post-acute withdrawal am I having today? What you can do is you can manage that post-acute withdrawal and then slow down and get back up and figure out what is stressing me out right now. What is this stuff, what's this stressor that I'm dealing with at this point in my life? Okay, so, and it's going to be different, you know, just depending on where you're at, the situation that's going on, right? Like, I always had really bad post-acute withdrawal, like right around I had to meet my PO every Wednesday for 2 years, right? Like, my PO never let me go to that like twice a week or once a month. You know, the 8th time I got arrested, he was like, no, you're one of those people, right? He was a jerk. So, he was burned out. So, like, every Tuesday night before I had to go see him, even though I hadn't used, right, I'd be like, oh, and I'd be getting bad post-acute withdrawal. Oh, I have a bad day, okay? And, you know, like, I have to go over to the court sometimes, right? Like, and I hate it. I mean, I know I'm going home. Right, I'm not in trouble anymore, but just even walking through the door, and the judges like me, right? Today, you know, I just still hate going, right? So what happens is that if you manage that, then you can go, I can consolidate, and I interrupt that, and I don't actually keep going down and getting more into the whole relapse process. If you don't manage that internally, externally, what happens is that if I can't think clearly, if I can't manage my emotions, if I start feeling more overwhelmed, I start losing the ability to manage all this stuff out here. And you start getting more and more, like people, that's when people might actually start noticing that you're having more crisis, that you're not managing well, that you're getting more stressed out, and they might notice it first. But we get defensive because, you know, especially if we've been trained to lie, right? If you've been through the legal system or you've been through court like I have been, you know, or other treatment centers where they were like, how you doing? I'm great. Everything's fine. Well, we're pushing it down, right? So we get more stressed out. And then pretty soon our life starts feeling like this, like you're trying to hold like 3 big beach balls underwater. You can get 2, but you go to grab this one and this one pops up. You get that down and then that one pops up, or you're like juggling 5 plates. It just gets really overwhelming. And, you know, you get to this point here what they call, where your denial finally breaks, and you get to that place we've talked about, where you get that option reduction, where you go, man, I'm so overwhelmed right now, I'm either going to drink and use, go crazy, or kill myself. And we've always talked, like we've talked about before, what's the healthiest choice on that day?
Use.
Yeah, because nobody wants to go crazy. Going crazy is scary. It's really frightening. If you're a sane person and you start feeling like you're losing touch with reality, people kill themselves before they go crazy. Or other people and then themselves before they take that total leap off the deep end there. It's frightening, okay? And we have a survival instinct we're born with because, you know, people really don't want to kill themselves. You know, it's like every baby has it. And the reason that you know every baby has it, because every baby cries, right? If you were born without a self-esteem, right, or this instinct that, you know, like, I should be taken care of, like whenever you were cold or tired or shit yourself in your diaper or whatever, you would just sit in your crib and go, don't worry about me. I'll just sit here, throw me a bone, do whatever you gotta do. Like, well, if I don't get anything, that's just my lot in life, you know? No baby does that. So everybody has to be taught in life to lose their voice, or that your voice doesn't matter, right? So especially like, you know, like going through the legal system, I just hate it when they just call people by their cause number, right, in court. A lot of times they call you by your number and not even your name. And I just go, God, can we get past that? You're more than your number, right? Or like over at Community Corrections where I work, they're like, they want to call people in by, like, what's your DOC number, you know, whatever like that. And I go, stop it. Right? Or if they say, these offenders. Oh, I hate that label. That irks me to no end. I go, these are people who have offended, but haven't we all? Every one of you in here at some point in your life, that's what I tell all the staff over there, could be sitting on that other side of the table. Don't tell me that you couldn't be. They're all, oh, okay. I said they are clients. Clients? I go, yes. They are clients. Are they paying your salary? Yes, they are. They are paying to be here. And not just their money, but their time. Especially if you're on house arrest, right? All the hoops you gotta jump through with that, Jesus. So, you know, so what happens is if you use, right, if you keep using, that's a relapse. If you use one time, it's just a lapse, and you can have this moment of sanity where you wake up and go, holy crap, I just used. I just broke a promise with myself not to give them ammunition. Or to, hurt myself anymore, or to, like break my promise with other people. But that's the powerlessness of addiction. Addiction makes you break your promises with yourself and with other people. Right? So, like when baby therapists that I work with, they always come up to me and they go, God, Chris, these addicts are just lying to me. And I go, why are we shocked? I said, dishonesty is required, but I said, who are they really lying to first? Is themselves, right? You're just collateral damage. I'm sorry. You're not that important. You are highly overestimating your importance in their universe. Right? Like, you're really, like, wow, you think you're that important? I said, why can't you just, all they want to do is get off probation. And I go, why can't you start there? What's wrong with that? What? They just don't. I can always tell people who've never really struggled with addiction. Because they don't, when you're a recovering addict, you have looked at yourself. Right? To get into recovery, it requires self-examination, honesty, doing the work. Right? Because if you want to get something you've never had, you got to do something you've never done. And it's a choice at the beginning to show up for recovery. It is not a feeling. Right? Because they all say at 12-step meetings, the time you need to go the most is when you feel like it the least, right? That's when you should probably be going to connect with other people in recovery, is when you just want to pull away the most. And we're all like that at the beginning. I never met anybody that ever walked in their first couple of meetings and said, hey, I'm really happy to be here. Right? Like, I heard you have a great self-improvement program. Who wants to be here for me? Who wants to help me? I'm ready. Right? We all walk in like this. Prove it. You tell me it's great. Right? But nobody meets us right here when we come in. And, finding our tribe, like the people who are actually going to acknowledge us right here. That when we come in and we go, I hate being here. Right? That's the one thing my sponsor always said to me. If you're having a bad day, Chris, you need to come to the meeting and talk about it. Because if you don't, you just stole from a person that doesn't know they can talk about it yet. Like they're trained to believe that I got to come and go, everything's great and everything's fine. Those aren't people that get better, though, in recovery, Chris. Those are people who, don't get what they need, and they wind up getting overwhelmed, and then people wonder why they go out and drink themselves to death or use or have an accident or something. And so he said, you have to be able to come in and go, I hate all you fuckers today. I did not sign up for this. I don't want to be here. I hate being here right now. And I said, you can't say that at a meeting, Bill. He said, have you ever said it at an AA meeting or an NA meeting? And I said, no. But I've said it in treatment and gotten in trouble. I've said it at probation and gotten in trouble. And he said, but that's not recovery. And he says, and that's not really treatment either, Chris, because treatment is supposed to meet you right where you're at when you come in. He said, only an ignorant therapist or inexperienced therapist can't deal with you coming in and getting big or being upset about missing your relationship with alcohol or drugs. They would just normalize it. Man, you are missing getting high. You are missing your relationship. All the positive things that it used to do for you, why wouldn't you be missing it? That loss of instant relief or whatever that is, okay? So, so one of the things that Bill said, you got to start getting in the way of, when we started working together, my sponsor, he said, you got to start getting in the way of checking in, Chris, with yourself. So, like on the second page on this thing, it shows relapse warning signs, okay? So there are 37 signs there that people can start experiencing. We don't have to go through those tonight, because most of us know what they are anyway, especially if you've been through treatment before. But on the third page, he said, when you've been thinking about drinking or using, or you feel like shaky or whatever, what did they tell you to do before in treatment, Chris? And I said, go to more meetings, read more, You know, Hazleton, when I was there at you know, it's a big treatment center in Minnesota, and they got in Florida now, and some places. They have this relapse journal that you're supposed to keep there that is 10 essay questions every night that they want you to keep for like at least a year, you know, once you're going through treatment, once you get out, and your therapist checks it with you and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, who is going to write 10 essay questions every night for the first year of recovery? I've been sober 31 years and I'm not going to write 10 essay questions every night. There's no freaking way. I'm doing that. So he said, you're already feeling stressed out because you're in relapse, and they want you to stress yourself out more, go to more meetings, jump through more hoops, do more work, right? And he said, why don't you just slow down and just name it where you're at? And I go, what? I don't know how to do that. And so this is what his sponsor gave to him in 1950. It's a daily relapse checklist, okay? And so his sponsor in 1950 made him keep this every day for 2 years. And it's a thing you do right before you go to bed at night, just to kind of give you some awareness about where you're at in your own process. Like how overwhelmed you might be that day, maybe what you might need to do the next day to like start pulling yourself together, de-stressing your life, managing wherever you're at the moment. Okay, so he said, you know, so what you do is like on the top there, you just would fill in whatever date that is. Okay, so for people I sponsor in AA, what I do when we work together is I give them a folder, right? And or a little notebook, and I have 2 years worth of these journals in there. Okay, I have 2 years worth. So I have 730 pages, because that's 2 years. Okay, and I said, every day, I just want you to check this off. And once you get into the hang of it, it only takes like 3 to 5 minutes to actually do it. But it gives you a good idea, and it keeps you grounded and connected. And the first thing on here is like, he said, these are the things people start letting go of. These are the disciplines, these are the structure. These are the practices that people start letting go of when they start pulling away and getting complacent and not, you know, keeping their primary focus in early recovery on staying sober. So he said the first one here is just like, how did I stay in touch with my recovery tools and the support system? How did I stay involved? So like if you attended a 12-step recovery group, you could check that off. If you talk to another person in recovery, like today you've talked to people in recovery, boom, you can check that off. Okay? Did I read any AA, any other 12-step, any recovery literature at all? If you did that, you can check that off. And did I use my safety card? That safety card we talked about managing cravings before. If I use that during the day, boom, it's a tool I used. Okay? The next part here is post-acute withdrawal, the thing we talked about last week. And how many of these 6 symptoms were you experiencing? Some days I had 1, other days I had all 6. Like usually on Tuesday nights, I had like all 6. Because I just hated my PO so much. Right? So like, you know, I'd have all 6. Okay? But I started to see patterns with that. And in the old days, like I said, Bill, they didn't know about post-acute withdrawal in 1950. Like, what do they have there? And he said they only had 2 words, fuck it. Like in the old days, they said, that's when you knew you were getting close to a slip. You started getting the, well, if this is recovery, fuck it. Right? It's not very clinical. But that's how we start feeling when we're having post-acute withdrawal. We start having these 6 symptoms here. Okay, getting more irritable, frustrated, can't sleep, whatever, hungry, angry, and then underneath it, it was HALT, H-A-L-T, was I having any of that? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. But now we know that that can also be all part of post-acute withdrawal. Okay, and then any of the triggers or relapse warning signs, and that's where that 37 things come in here, right? So in my apartment when I first got sober, I had a little recovery table. So I had my 37 signs up there. I had my little checklist at night, and I would just go through and say, and he says, don't write it all out longhand. Just like write I had number 1, number 3, number 5, number 8, whatever that is that night. It's just getting you an idea of how many you're having. And then 2 things I can do tomorrow to deal with that, especially if I'm having post-acute withdrawal. Like, one of the things is manage that stress. So I would avoid my family when I was having bad post-acute withdrawal. Because when I get together with them, it's always like Jerry Springer holiday. We talked about that before, right? Or any kind of event, if someone's, there's going to be a fight, it's going to get big. So I would just avoid slippery people, places, and things when it was really getting bad. And then the person that I'll talk to about that. Because Bill told me, like, the first thing you just got to do is name it, Chris. You can't own anything until you actually name it. And saying it out loud to somebody else makes it real. So, the person I always would call was Bill, because, like, I was a good drunk at the end of my using. Like, I never got invited back to anybody's house twice, because I was a thief. And I would just steal from everybody. So, like Bill said, how many people are happy to see you, Chris? I said, nobody. Right? So, it took him a year to stop frisking me when I left his house. Empty your pockets. Right? I go, sorry, Bill. God damn it, quit stealing. We go out of the store, like, empty your coat. What? He goes, I am not getting arrested for you. Because I just have to, like, even to this day, right? Personalities don't change. Like, when I get overwhelmed or frustrated or I feel like the world's treating me wrong, I'll be at Myers going, I got itchy fingers. Still, to this day. It never leaves me, right? And I go, I don't need to do that anymore. I got backup. Right? I don't have to, like, give my power over to the legal system anymore. I don't have to do that, right? I got resources today. Okay? But it doesn't make it go away. I just have to own it, all right? And then what did my daily meditation include? And that's basically, how do you slow down and listen to yourself today in some way? Prayer is what? Asking. Meditation is listening. People pray all the time in active addiction. Oh God, get me out of this, right? Help me get through this. I promise it'll be better, okay? But meditation is actually listening. Like, how do you slow down and listen to yourself, right? One new thing I learned about recovery today was, Bill said, keep learning. Keep learning about recovery. So that's, when I go to meetings, I say, I don't get anything out of the meetings. He goes, why would you? You've been going to meetings for 3 months, but you've been invested in your addiction for 15 years. Why would this be valuable compared to that? So he said, your presence is the most powerful thing that you bring as a newcomer, because all farts like me, Chris, can't stay sober unless we give it away. So he said, for when you go to meetings, try to leave one positive thing, even if it's just the willingness to find one positive thing. So try to find one positive thing you can take from the meeting. Because I've been going to, like, consistently to AA for 31 years. But I'll tell you what, they're not all great meetings, right? There are sometimes that I go and I go, well, the positive thing I'm getting out of this meeting is that I don't ever have to come back to this meeting. Or that this is not healthy recovery. Well, I just got to be reminded of that sometimes, right? That, oh my God, this is like a war stories meeting, right? Where people just bitch and live in the problem, right? So that's a valuable thing too. Like, that's why it took me 8 months to find a home group when I moved here in '90. After 5 years of being sober. So, and then a positive thing I did to take care of myself today. And if you can't think of anything else positive, if you did not drink or use today, and you kept your promise to yourself, and you did not give anybody else ammunition that they could use against you in any way, that is a positive thing. If that's all you can think about today. And I think that's huge, because the first year of recovery, they say, if you stay sober the first year, you've changed everything in your life for that first year. Because every season, every reason, every situation that ever made you think about drinking and using will present itself in the first year. And if in spite of that, you still chose not to drink or use on that day, even if you just white-knuckled it on those days, you still did something different than what an active alcoholic or addict would do. That's recovering there. Practicing alcoholics and addicts just go, fuck it. I might as well go, okay? And then 5 things I'm grateful for today. So when I start sponsoring people, like, I make them, they have to keep this, right? And then whenever we get together, I make them read 2 pages of it. The same way my sponsor made me do. Just read 2 pages, let's see how you're doing. The first time that we go through this, nobody ever puts, like, number 1, like the number 1 thing they're grateful for. Like, I very rarely have people put sobriety, my relationship with my new higher power, whatever, it's always like my family, my girlfriend, my wife, my job, my money, you know, this, whatever. But they, you know, very rarely do they even list sobriety as one of the top 5 things. And so I say, isn't that interesting? Because where's your sobriety in this? And they go, well, I don't feel real grateful for that today because I'm not that invested in it yet. I go, oh, that makes sense to me. But I said, if you can remind yourself that, like, if I don't stay sober, if you really are a person that experiences powerlessness, unmanageability when you put it in your system, that if I don't stay sober, it runs the show and not me, right? It makes the decisions about where my life goes and not me. So, you know, the most important thing I do in my day is, like, stay clean and sober no matter what. Every person I sponsor apologizes to me every time we get together the first few times. I'm sorry to take up your time, Chris. Thanks for meeting with me. And I said, quit apologizing. Like, the most important thing I do in my week is not going down to community corrections. It's going to my home group on Friday night and meeting with the people that I sponsor on Saturday and Sunday. Because if I don't keep it away, I can't keep it. If I don't stay sober, my addiction runs the show, my life's fucked. It just is. It's screwed. Because it runs the show and not me. So, you know, that's, you know, gratitude is a habit. And the reason that I said to Bill, like, why do I have to keep doing this? Because they seem like the same kind of things all the time over and over again. And he said, because addiction looks for an excuse, Chris. An excuse to justify going back to drinking and using. He said, can you think of one reason why you should ever pick up a drink or a drug? You personally, because what is the decision you've made about alcohol and drugs? I go, I haven't. There is no logical reason for me to ever pick up a drink or a drug knowing how I react to it, Bill. I just know me. That every time I've ever tried to control it, it wound up running my life instead of me running it. So he said, so there's no logical reason for you ever to do that. An excuse is always a reaction to a feeling, which are not logical. Like, emotions in the moment are not always based in logic. So he said, and your addiction, though, looks for an excuse. It needs one in order to justify going back to drinking and using again. And the problem is that smart people can convince themselves that a bad idea is a good one over and over again. Because you're creative and brilliant and adaptive, determined and persistent. And so that's why smart people die in recovery. Because the smarter you are, and the more sensitive you are, the more you feel things, the easier it is to convince yourself to go about it. Simpletons a lot of times get recovery faster. People who are really cognitively challenged, okay, whatever I gotta do. I just don't want to get arrested again. Right? I don't want to make people mad. Okay, yeah. So, and then my sponsor had me do this. He had me sign a relapse journal contract with him. Okay, on the next page here, was I had to agree that I would talk with him once a week about my journal, even if we didn't meet that week. So when I moved to Indiana, we'd already worked through step 12, but I called him every Sunday, and he said, well, I call him Sunday every 8 o'clock every Sunday, and he would say, read me 2 pages from your journal this week, Chris. Let's see how your addiction's talking to you this week. Let's just have a check-in, right? And he said, when you make a contract with a person, Chris, it's like you're asking them, it's a big thing that you're asking people to do because you're making an agreement with them. And they're contracting to be a support in your life and to really show up and be accountable that way. And so, you know, it's good to find somebody that has like long-term recovery if you're going to make a contract with them about like, I need to be checking in with myself regularly. Because addiction hates structure, boundaries, and discipline. This is a discipline. It's a daily discipline to do this. And addiction rebels at that. I cannot have structure because I got to go when I got to go. Now, once I'm satisfied, my pleasure center is all stimulated, then I can attend to whatever's out here. But as soon as you tell me that I got to feed it again, I got to go. I can't have structure, boundaries, or discipline, or keep agreements with you. That's just the way addiction works. So he said, we've got to start building this structure in, and it's a decision, not a feeling at the beginning, to do it, right? And after a while, it becomes habit, you know, so the last thing I'll talk about here is like what a 12-step sponsor's role is. Try to get this done in 5 minutes, get you guys out of here. All right? So, like, number one job for a 12-step sponsor is to do what?
Listen.
Take you through the 12 steps. And listen, right? Okay. They're your sounding board. They're the person that you like, the one like grounding source in recovery for you. Okay? But their primary job is to take you from step 1 to step 12. That's it. That's their main function. Introduce you to the program and things like that. So, they're safe, and like it says here, they're a safe person that you can trust. That takes time to find out if they are, right? Like when I was 17 and going through treatment and court order, yeah, I think it was like the second time or something like that. They said, you got to get a sponsor before you get out. So I asked this guy, and like, I was over at his house, we were working on the steps, and then he was like going, hey, like, my neck hurts, can you rub it? And I'm like going, what? Like, do we do this in recovery? like this seems fucked up, right? Like, and he was just getting weirder. And he started taking off his shirt. I was like, hey, right? So I was talking to my friend Tim, and I said, Tim said, like, aren't you supposed to be over your sponsor's house? And I said, I don't feel like going over there, man. He seemed weird. He says, why? And I said, because he's like, after we work on a step, he'll say things like, hey, well, you like rub my shoulder. And he goes, Tim said, oh my God, fire him. I said, you can fire a sponsor? He goes, you not only have a right to, you have a responsibility to, Chris. Not everybody in program is healthy. And you can't know what a person's like until they're there, right? And so he said, but hasn't he taught you? He's been a great teacher, hasn't he? I said, a great teacher. He said, when you sponsor somebody in the future, will you ever step over that boundary? Will you ever take from somebody? I go, hell no, I won't. Because I know what that feels like, right? And he said, so I said, how do you fire a sponsor? He said, call him up, thank him for being a great teacher. Don't go meet him in person. Say, hey, and his name was Bill too, actually. And I said, hey, Bill, thanks for being a great teacher. But it doesn't feel like a good fit for me. But I want to thank you for like bringing me this far. You've taught me some valuable things, like how I'm not the sponsor. I didn't have to say that out loud, right? I didn't have to say that to him. But he said, I just said, he said, and Kyle said, now here's how you know if he's healthy, Chris. If he's healthy, he'll just say, okay, well, you know, I might be a little disappointed, but, you know, I just want you to get what you need. Just keep looking, Chris. If that's what he'll say if he's healthy. If he's not, he'll get mad. Or he'll try to blame you. Or he'll try to coerce you to stay. He won't hear you, right? I said, what do I do if he does that? He goes, hang up. Can you argue logic with crazy? Because that's crazy, right? That ain't healthy. So I call him, Bill, thanks for being a great teacher, man. Just doesn't feel like the best fit for me, so I'm just going to keep looking. And the first words out of his mouth were, you ungrateful motherfucker. Right? And I was like, what? And there's part of me that was going, what? What'd you say? Like, I want to get big, right? You know, like, well, it was like he just punched me, right? And I said, oh, hang up. Boom. Right? And Kyle said, call me right afterwards. And so I called Kyle and I said, holy crap, Kyle. He called me ungrateful motherfucker, right? He goes, did you hang up? And I said, yeah. He says, good. Right? He said, some people are sicker than others in this program. But he's been a great teacher. So, you know, it takes time to find out if you can trust them, okay? They monitor your progress. They role model, right? And also, they have to be available. When I wasn't working, like I didn't start working again until I was retired the last 7 years, so I could sponsor a lot more people. But now that I'm working again, like I can only meet people on the weekend, so I limit it to 3 people. I don't want to like tell people, hey, I can be a resource for you, but I can't commit to meeting with you because I'm already meeting 3 people on the weekends, and you know I need to be available for you. If you need to call me, you need to be whatever, but I can be a contact person for you, but I can't do the step work with you because that requires a lot of work with people. So, you know, they know their limits, all right? They don't chase you. My sponsor said, I will never call you. And he never did. In the 26 years we worked together, he never initiated contact. Because in the big book it says that you don't chase people. That it has to be a program of your choosing. It's your free will, you have to direct. So he never called me. He said, I'll always call you back, but I'll never initiate contact with you. They've actually worked the 12 steps. So like, one thing I hate about probation, and that I've really jumped on them down at community corrections, they were like saying to people, get a sponsor, you better get a sponsor, you gotta show me that. And I say, stop that. Stop it. You can ask people to get names of people in the program that they can, have contact with, But I said, a sponsor takes time to see, like, do you have what I want? How can they know that if they're just showing up? That takes time to, like, see who the people are that come in consistently. Do you practice what you preach? Are you the genuine deal, right? And how can you, like, all you're doing is getting people to lie and maybe grab somebody too quickly just to get off probation. Knock it off. You're setting people up for failure. It just pisses me off to no end. All right? And they're like, oh, okay. I said, so, yeah. Yeah, stop getting people to lie.
I got in trouble for telling my probation officer to stop asking me to get a sponsor. She's like, why? You need to be working the steps and all that, and we're going to sponsor. I'm like, well, I've been on restriction most of the time.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so I can't even get out to get a sponsor. But I mean, most of the people I meet are, not anyone I want to be talking to.
And trying to explain it to them, that sometimes if they've never walked that journey, right? And you sit there and they've never had to go, actually, I actually got in trouble once because I said to my PO, I said, have you ever gotten a sponsor? Do you even know what that feels like? Who's your mentor? Right? And he said, we are not here to talk about me. He got all big and he got all angry, right, and everything like that. And I sat there and I went, well then, you know what? Like, don't ask me to do something you haven't done. He said, why not? And I said, because that's called being a hypocrite. That did not go well. Okay, so, I got a write-up for that one, but it's like, yeah. But I didn't care at that one. You get that point where you're just frustrated, right? And I said, listen, that is not healthy. So, I mean, God, every time I've ever worked in the legal system to try to change the mentality of an organization, it's like when you name it, like, what is that person, they say, the person telling the truth is always the bad guy in a dysfunctional organization or family, right? It's like, they're always the bad guy, right? So I'm like, right now I'm the bad guy. One of the, like, young guys there, he came up to me and he goes, Chris, people don't know what to do with you here, right? I go, oh, that's good, right? So I'm ruffling feathers, right? And he goes, yeah, because you make people feel really uncomfortable. I go, yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with them being uncomfortable.
People that are full crap.
Woo! Well, and it's because they're trained that way, right?
But I mean, I wasn't saying that.
Right.
They're full crap.
And they're uninformed. And they're also inexperienced. Because if they haven't experienced that, humility, where life humbles you, and you get to that place where you go, I'm convinced I cannot do this alone. I need help. And that's very hard for men, to break the myth of self-reliance in recovery. It's one of the things that starts our relapse cycle a lot of times, is that I got to do all this by myself, right? Self-sufficiency is a good thing. Self-reliance is a myth that will kill you. Because if you can't ever get the ability to ask for help when you need it, and be able to discern who's like actually giving you help, are they genuine, are they real, then you're screwed, because then you're going to get tapped out and you're going to have to go back to what you know instead of get what you need. So I think the last thing they said here is that is they're like the same gender as you, right? Like, anybody heard of 13 stepping?
I've heard it was me.
Yeah, when I moved here, like in '90, the 13-step house was still here, and I was like, what did they call that place? Where are we going? Because I used to drive people to the meetings when I worked at Charter Beacon Hospital, like all the clients. I just drive them out to meetings, right? Where are we going? They said the 13-step house. I go, what the hell? Are you kidding me? They actually have a place called the 13th. Do they know what the 13th step is in this program? It's when you try to sleep with people, right?
Oh, for real?
Yeah, that's what they call 13 stepping. right?
I
There are
went to a
12
meeting
steps.
there thinking I was going to get lucky.
Well, you know, it's like, I mean, most of us have backup addictions, right? So we got a primary one, but then if we can't use that, we all got backups that we can. And for a lot of people, sex can be a backup addiction. Stimulates the same part of the brain as cocaine. So hey, you know, pornography is just as addicting as cocaine is. So it's like, I thought, oh, okay, but 13 stepping is actually like when, you know, like I got a guy I'm working with right now that, you know, he's going through a divorce, it's getting finalized, he's coming to meetings and he's like going, hey Chris, some of these girls are pretty hot here, right? And I said, listen, if any woman comes up to you the first year of recovery and says, hey, let's go out, you need to look at her and go, what is wrong with you, woman? How sick are you? I can barely take care of myself. And you're coming up to me, like, and you wanted me to, like, that is not healthy. Any person with long-term recovery knows that when people come in, they're wounded and overwhelmed. That is like, that would be like if she came up to you and she came around the corner, right, and you were thrown out of your car and you're bleeding and you need a triage and everything, and she walked up to you and said, hey, let's hook up. Instead of calling the ambulance. You're hot, let's screw. That's not what you need in the moment. Right? Like, no. You need to look at her and go, man, that's crazy talking to me right there. Or unhealthy. Any person with long-term recovery knows people their first year are wounded and overwhelmed. And they would never do that to another person. They would say, hey, you know what, get some recovery time under your belt. Then we can date. Get through your steps, do whatever. If I'm still single, you're still single, we'd be a better match at that point. But right now, that would not be a good thing to do to you, right? Okay? And the last thing I'll say is that your sponsor is not a friend. A friend implies equal give and take. So my sponsor was my age. I'm 56. He was 55 when I met him. And I was 24. And we were driving one day and I said, Bill, I'm so glad you're my friend, and this, whatever. And he pulled the car up and he goes, who the hell said I was your friend? And I was like, well, we're pretty friendly. You seem like we get along okay. And he said, Chris, a friendship implies equal give and take. There's a reason that men that are 55 don't want to hang around 24-year-old men and we don't socialize with you. I said, why? And he said, because you're annoying. Right? You're annoying because we've already been there. We understand your 20s are for figuring out who you are and trying all this life and everything. And, you know, we need to hang around guys my age. Now, if I sponsor somebody my age, Chris, if they get it and they get healthy, we might be able to have more of a friendship because we have the same life experience and we got the same points of reference and, you know. But no, we're never going to be friends. I will always be your mentor, but we're never going to be friends. Because I'm always going to be 30 years older than you are. Right? So it's not about having this friendship, it's about having a mentoring relationship. And if they're your age, after you heal and can bring the same thing to a relationship, you might develop a friendship. I have people I sponsor my age that we actually we're friends today, right? Because we're the same age. But that was a nice distinction that he said, you know, hell, we're not friends. No, it's gonna happen, right? So that's an unrealistic expectation, I think. So anyway, like I said, this is just like awareness in these tools, like this checklist here. Tools are only good if you use them, right? If you don't use them, then the only tool you got in your bag is alcohol or drugs. When you get overwhelmed, it's like that old saying, if your only tool you got in your bag is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So the more tools you get, the more you use them, the more equipped you are for early recovery. So, oh, it's 8, go. Amen.